In this lesson, we're going to continue to learn a few techniques to modify and update images in Matlab. And so here we'll focus on how we can rearrange appropriate components within an image. And so let's consider that we want to make some modifications to our images in that we have an image that is going to be read in called faces. And let's get the rows, columns, and the layers associated with the image. And so we're able to get that it has dimensions of 500 by 500, and it has three layers, red, green, and blue. And so we will display the image here with the appropriate axes for 500 rows and 500 columns. Now, what we want to do is we want to make a modification to the image, and where we'll cut appropriate components in half and we'll do this for the column indices of the image. So we're going to remove a fourth of the columns on the left portion, as well as a fourth of the columns on the right portion to display our image. And so in this case, what we have here being displayed for our columns, where we cut out the values appropriately here. And so this means that we'll have our image being displayed for all of the rows, and then the columns starting at 1 to the columns in half. And so then we'll want to take the same approach again, where we display our image, where we've cut off the left half of the image. And so in this case, we've cut it off to have it displayed. And we have our image here where it has been cut in half. So essentially, we're only displaying half of the image. Now, if we want to also display the right half of the image, we're able to do that as well. So in this example that we have here, we're going to cut the right half of the image off for display, and then we'll display that right half of the image as well. So we have all of the rows and the rows being shown, and then we'll go to the columns. We say the columns over 2 plus 1 all the way to the end. And so the right half of the original image is what is displayed here. Now, if we want to do a swap of the images, we're able to do that as well. So in this example here, we've created a new image that is based off of our original image. And now what we want to do is make some modifications. And so we want to say that essentially the left side of the image will get the right side of the original image here. And then we want to make the same change to the right side. And so we'll say that the right side of the image will now get the original left side. So in this case, we have reversed the sides of the image. So you can think of it as we've split the original image in two, and we've swapped each side of it appropriately. And so that new image that we have here gets displayed. We're also able to provide for swapping of specific.
Your computer or your bed, you just joined us. We are on a break until 10 past.
We also want to be able to make modifications to our images based off of swapping of quadrants as well. And so what we want to do is we'll read in the original image. And so we'll use the image read command to read in our faces.png file, get the rows, columns, and appropriate layers that are being associated with it. And we'll make sure our dimensions were provided appropriately. And so we have our rows, columns, and again, a display of the image. And so now if we want to focus on a specific quadrant associated with the image, we can do that. So here we have the top left portion of the original image that we want to focus our attention on. And so we'll say the rows to focus on is starting at position 1 to the rows -2 to the rows divided in half. And then for columns, starting at column 1 to the column in half in all of our colors. And so that is provided here. And what we see is that this is the top 1/4 of the original image. And so that is going to be represented in this quadrant up until about below the eye. And so that allows for us to break the image into quadrants and obtain that component. If we wanted to obtain the top right, again, we're going to have the same rows that are being used. And then we're going to go for the columns over in half, and then we'll go all the way to the end of it. So we'll say columns in half +1 to the end, and then we'll get all of the necessary color vectors that are needed. So again, we will also continue to use this for getting the bottom portions of our images as well. And so in this case, we want to get the bottom left portion of our image. And so in order to pull that, we're going to extract out the specific rows to focus on. So we'll do from the rows over 2 +1 until the end. And then we'll do the columns. We want the columns to the columns over divided by 2 to denote half of the columns in all of the appropriate colors. So that is provided for us here. That gives us our bottom left portion of the image. And then we will want to do the same thing with the bottom right portion of the image, where we enter our appropriate indices to denote halfway for the rows to the end, and then for the columns, halfway until the end as well, with all colors. And so that gets displayed here. And now what we want to do is we can make a copy of the original image where we have swapped the quadrants that we've split into. And so in this, we're going to put the bottom right on the top. So we define the indices for that quadrant of our new image, and then we'll assign the value from the bottom right, and then we're going to put the bottom left to be on the top right. Again, here we define the appropriate indices that we will be using, and then we provide the new quadrant that we want to use. And then for our bottom portion, we want to make it assigned to the top right. So we provide our appropriate indices for the rows and the columns, and we assign it to the new value that we want to use, which was going to be the original top right portion. So now that top right is going to be over here on the bottom. And we can make the same thing for our bottom right portion, where the bottom right will now get the top left. So now we have our new image that is shown here for us to denote the readjustment of the quadrants that we have. And so we're also able to do some different resizing and placement of images as well. So let's say we want to import a number of different images. We've done that here. So we have a Simpsons frame that we have imported. So let's run. So we have these imported. This is displaying the frame and the actual images that we have here for Bart, Lisa, Homer, Marge, Maggie, and family. So we have aligned these into a photo frame for each one. And now what we want to do is provide for a mechanism where we can resize and paste the images appropriately. And so in this case, we just split our image into appropriate frames that we can make use of. And so for here, to include Maggie in the image, we're going to set the appropriate indices for the rows and columns that we want to use. So we're going to provide this to be from 51 to 100 for both the rows as well as the columns. For Lisa, we're going to set it to be from 51 to 125, and then 251 to 325. And so Lisa will be put here. We've made the size for the dimension for Lisa to be 75 by 75. And then we're going to do the same thing for Marge, where we've put the image for Marge to start at row 151 to 250 and columns 126 to 225. For the image that we have for Bart, we've set it to start at row 126 to 250 and then column 351 to 475. So it is going to be here on the right portion of our grid. And then we have our last two images, one for Homer, which will start at row 301 to 450, and then it will be from columns 51 to 200. We've resized it, so now Homer takes 150 rows and 150 columns as well. And then we'll provide for the same avenue for resizing for the entire family picture. And this is going to go from row 276 to 475, and then column 276 to 475. So that provides us with a idea of how we can import images and combine them together into a grid and arrange them appropriately using the rows and column indices for our grid. So this is just one way in which you can import images and provide for ways to resize them and rearrange them appropriately. We've gone through this example where we are able to do it for rows and columns, as well as swapping out appropriate quadrants for the image as well.